Employees humiliated the black cleaner, but when she fired the CEO, what happened next was unbelievable. What happens when the cleaner everyone ignores becomes the heroine who brings down the arrogant CEO? Angela Davis, a 45-year-old black woman, lives this reality every day as she cleans the hallways of a large corporation in New York. A single mother facing constant humiliation, her strength and resilience are tested each day. Deep down, Angela dreams of a world where her voice will be valued and her work recognized. She carries with her the wisdom of her grandmother, a civil rights activist, and observes her surroundings with a keen eye, aware that behind her invisible facade lies powerful knowledge. However, the environment at the corporation is hostile and challenging. The young CEO, Ethan Reynolds, a scion of a wealthy family, views employees as mere shadows, insignificant in his world of luxury and privilege. Alongside him, Olivia Brooks, the manipulative human resources manager, reinforces this hierarchy, ensuring that subordinate workers like Angela remain on the brink of invisibility. Angela's daily interactions with these characters reveal a power play in which she is always the weaker party, but deep inside, the flame of rebellion begins to flicker. The constant humiliations and disrespect start to shape an internal conflict within Angela. She finds herself questioning her worth and wondering but Angela's determination never leaves her. The need for justice and recognition drives her. What she did not expect is that on one fateful night, while overhearing a conversation in a meeting, a dark secret about Ethan would change the course of her life. This discovery would pave the way for a meticulous plan that would not only challenge the company's hierarchy, but also transform the narrative of her own existence. With her son Marcus by her side, Angela begins to devise a plan to expose the corruption that permeates the company. Together, they form an unlikely alliance, uniting their strengths to confront those who underestimated them. What seemed to be a simple cleaning job transforms into a battleground, where Angela fights for dignity and justice. With each step, the tension rises, and Angela's story intertwines with the struggles of many facing similar challenges, demonstrating that true strength can be found in the voices that have been silenced. As Angela prepares for her counterattack, the question echoing in her mind is, how far is she willing to go to reclaim what is rightfully hers? The fate of the corporation and its arrogant CEO is about to change forever. Angela looked at the gleaming corridors of the corporation, the shine of the clean floor reflecting her exhaustion. Every day she faced the same humiliations, the same disdainful glances from the executives who passed by her as if she were invisible. The feeling of insignificance accompanied her, but she knew there was something more within her, a strength that her grandmother had always taught her to value. However, that strength was beginning to wear thin. That morning, while tidying up a meeting room, Angela heard laughter coming from the hallway. Ethan Reynolds and Olivia Brooks were chatting with a group of directors. The tone of disdain in their voices was palpable. "These employees don't understand anything about what really matters," Ethan said with an arrogant smile. Angela felt a wave of anger. How could someone be so insensitive? She thought of Marcus, her son, and how much she wanted a better future for him, far from that indifference. In the days that followed, the tension began to mount. Angela decided she needed to do something about it. The fight for dignity and respect could no longer be just a distant dream. With Marcus's help, who always supported her, she started compiling information about the company. They would meet at night after a long day of work. Marcus, a smart teenager full of ideas, became her most valuable ally. He brought a fresh perspective and a bold outlook, challenging his mother to be more audacious. However, the path was not easy. Angela faced the fear that if she were caught, she would lose her job, the only source of income she had. What if Ethan and Olivia decided to retaliate? The thought of being fired left her anxious. During one of their meetings, when Marcus suggested they record the conversation they had overheard, Angela hesitated. "What if we get caught? What can we do if they threaten us?" she questioned, the weight of responsibility pressing on her chest. But Marcus, with his youth and determination, managed to convince her. "Mum, you always taught me that fear can't paralyze us. We need to fight for what is right." These words resonated deeply with Angela, and she felt a spark of courage beginning to shine again. Meanwhile, within the company, Olivia noticed that something was changing. She observed that some employees were starting to unite, discussing low wages and poor working conditions. The human resources manager, who always prided herself on maintaining the hierarchy intact, began to feel threatened. It was a power game, and she was determined to crush any rebellion before it grew. Olivia started to keep a closer watch on the employees, especially Angela, who seemed to be the most proactive. The tension escalated, and Angela realized she needed to be more cautious. One night, while reviewing her notes, Angela and Marcus received an anonymous message. "Be careful, don't trust anyone." The message left Angela on high alert. Betrayal could come from anywhere, and the idea that someone might be watching her made her anxious. The trust she had in her fight seemed to be tested in ways she had never imagined. What worried her the most was the impact all of this would have on Marcus. She didn't want her son to be dragged into a conflict that could end badly. "Maybe we should stop," suggested Angela, her voice trembling. Marcus looked at her firmly. "Mum, giving up is what they want. We need to keep fighting, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who is suffering." Before we continue with this emotional story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. And let us know in the comments what city you are watching this video from. Marcus's determination reignited the flame within Angela, but doubt still lingered in her mind. She wondered if this fight was really worth it. What if they failed? What if the quest for justice only led them to more pain and humiliation? The questions tormented her, but the image of the arrogant CEO and his accomplice Olivia reminded her of what was at stake. The struggle was just beginning, and the hardest battle would be against her own fears. However, as the days passed, Angela began to realize she was not alone. Other employees, inspired by Marcus's courage and Angela's determination, began to come together. Small conversations, whispers of hope and outrage arose every day. The idea that change was possible began to take shape, and in this new support network, Angela found the strength she thought she had lost. Thus, the invisible cleaner began to transform into the heroine who would challenge not only an arrogant CEO, but the very system that oppressed her. Angela felt the pressure mounting every day. The atmosphere in the corporation had become a web of suspicious glances and nervous murmurs. The whispers that were once discreet now echoed off the walls like an echo of silent revolt. She couldn't shake the feeling that at any moment she could be unmasked. Fear consumed her, but the determination to fight for a better future for Marcus was a force that kept her moving. That week, during a team meeting, Angela noticed that the looks from her co-workers were changing. Instead of looks of disdain, she began to see a glimmer of hope on some faces. But this hope also brought a new kind of tension. The executives, realizing the atmosphere of discontent, increased the pressure on the employees. The demands grew higher, with impossible deadlines and unrealistic expectations. Angela and her colleagues began to feel the weight of this pressure, and exhaustion became a constant in their lives. One night, while trying to rest after a particularly heavy day, Angela received a text message from a colleague, Clara. "We need to meet. We can't let this happen." Angela knew Clara was referring to the oppressive climate hanging over the team. Her heart raced. A meeting could be dangerous, but the need to connect with others who felt the same pushed her forward. With a mix of anxiety and hope, she decided to go. At the meeting, in a small cafe near the office, Angela saw tired but determined faces. The colleagues shared their stories of humiliation, and the empathy in the air was palpable. But there was a dilemma. Some employees were hesitant. "What if we get fired?" one of the participants questioned. "What if our fight is in vain?" The words of doubt echoed in Angela's heart, but the vision of Marcus encouraged her to move forward. In that group, a man named Ricardo, who worked in marketing, began to talk about creating a petition to demand better working conditions. "If we come together, we can make a difference. We have to show them that we are more than just numbers on a payroll," he said passionately. Angela felt her determination grow, but fear still haunted her. What if they failed? What if this fight only led them to more pain? But looking at the faces in front of her, she realized she had no choice. They were all ready to fight together. Thus, they began to plan and organize a silent but powerful movement. Each of them had their own stories, their own reasons to fight, and that united them in a way Angela could not have imagined. She felt part of something bigger. Meanwhile, the pressure on Olivia and the executives increased. Realizing that dissatisfaction was starting to spread, Olivia decided to act. She called emergency meetings, trying to stifle any hint of rebellion before it became a real problem. Tension mounted, and conversations became increasingly strained. Angela and her colleagues needed to be more careful. With each step they took, the fight became more intense and the consequences heavier. One night when Angela got home, she found Marcus looking worried. "Mom, you seem different. Is everything okay?" He noticed the exhaustion on her face and the sadness in her eyes. Angela had to fight back tears. "I'm fine, dear. Just tired." But the truth was that the battle was beginning to affect her physically and emotionally. The sleepless nights, the constant worries, and the stress were weighing heavily on her shoulders. Weeks went by, and despite their efforts, the team meeting did not bring the expected results. The petition had been ignored, and the promises of change made by the directors were empty. Angela felt a deep blow. What should have been a step towards change turned into a huge disappointment. Doubt began to gnaw at her determination. What if we never succeed? What if all of this is in vain? She questioned herself in a moment of weakness. But Marcus, always optimistic, wouldn't let her give up. "Mother, even if we don't see immediate results, we are doing the right thing. We can't stop now." Her words brought a bit of light amidst the darkness. Angela realized that even if the path was difficult, the journey was worth it. The struggle was not just for her and Marcus, but for everyone who felt invisible and undervalued. With this in mind, Angela decided that she couldn't let disillusionment paralyze her. She remembered the strength her grandmother always taught her to value, and so, with the support of Marcus and her colleagues, she prepared to face the challenges ahead, determined not to let fear take over. The fight for dignity and respect was far from over, and Angela's courage was about to be tested in ways she could never have imagined. Angela felt her world was about to crumble. After weeks of planning and fighting, an unexpected event occurred, changing the course of her journey. During a team meeting when she least expected it, a text message arrived on her phone. It was from Clara, who was visibly shaken. "Angela, you need to see this. Ricardo has been fired." The news hit her like a punch to the stomach. Ricardo, the man who had inspired the team to come together and fight for better working conditions, was now gone. The meeting room fell silent, and all eyes turned to Angela. She could feel the pressure mounting. What did this mean for the movement they were trying to build? What did it mean for them? A sense of despair swept over the group. Angela felt a mix of anger and helplessness. Ricardo's dismissal was not just about one less person on the team. It was a sign that the corporation was willing to go to great lengths to stifle any dissatisfaction. And fear began to creep back into her heart, like a shadow that seemed impossible to shake off. What if they fire us too? What if we are next? The thought tormented her, but at the same time the memory of Marcus gave her courage. During a break in the meeting, Angela stepped away for a moment, trying to organize her thoughts. What should she do now? Was it time to give up or fight even harder? The pressure was unbearable, and the feeling of failure enveloped her. What she felt was a heavy burden, and the responsibility of leading the group seemed like an impossible task. The fear of losing not only her position, but also the trust of her colleagues consumed her. As she walked around the room, Angela spotted Clara, who was in a corner with teary eyes. An impulse made her approach. "Clara, we need to stay united. Ricardo was not the first, and he may not be the last, but that only means we need to be stronger." Clara's gaze reflected doubt, but also a small spark of hope. "You are right, Angela. But at what cost? How long will we endure this?" Clara's words echoed in Angela's mind. She realized that the struggle was not just about improving working conditions, it was also about the courage to confront a system that perpetuated oppression. But at the same time, the pressure she felt led her to reconsider her choices. Was this fight truly the best decision for her and Marcus? What if the cost was too high? The ride home was heavy. Marcus was waiting for her at the door with a smile, but as soon as he saw his mother's worried expression, his smile faded. "What happened, Mom?" The simple question made Angela feel the weight of her decisions. How could she explain to him that her fight for dignity was coming at a high price? "It was a difficult day, but I'm okay." She smiled at him, but inside, confusion consumed her. That night, as she tried to sleep, doubts tormented her. Ricardo's dismissal was not just a blow to the team, it was a wake-up call. What was she willing to sacrifice? Her job, her security, Marcus's security. The fight was becoming real and dangerous. What if she failed? What if their courage wasn't enough? With these thoughts swirling in her mind, Angela began to reflect on what success truly meant. For many, success was having a good job, a high salary, and security. But for her, success now seemed different. It was about being able to look into her son's eyes and know that she was doing what was right. It was about not letting herself be silenced, even when the voices of oppression were loud and threatening. The next morning, upon waking, A new determination blossomed within her. Ricardo's dismissal, though painful, served as a catalyst. She couldn't let fear paralyze her. She decided that the fight was not just hers, but for all those who felt powerless. If they were fired, so be it, but they would fight and unite until the end. Angela stood up with a new purpose. It was time to re-evaluate her choices and prepare for what was to come. The journey would be long and full of challenges, but now she was more willing than ever to face reality with courage and strength. After all, the true struggle was not just against oppression, but for dignity and for Marcus's future. And this fight, she decided, would be worth it. Angela woke up that morning with an added weight in her heart. Ricardo's dismissal still echoed in her mind, like a constant alert that the time to act was running out. Looking out the window, she saw the sunlight filtering through the clouds, a small sign of hope, but the restlessness within her did not dissipate. She knew that from that day on, things would change radically. As she got ready for work, Angela reflected on what she had decided the night before. The fear of losing her job and Marcus's security was still palpable, but the idea of staying silent left her distressed. What else could I lose if I didn't fight? The answer was clear. I would lose the chance to make a difference. This fight was not just for her, but for all those who felt suffocated under the weight of oppression. With this new determination, she got dressed, had a quick coffee, and left for work. Upon arriving, the atmosphere in the company was tense. Whispers and murmurs were constant, and her colleagues looked at her with suspicion. Angela felt the pressure mounting. What she had decided was more than just a personal choice. It was a call to all who wanted change. But how to start this fight? What should she say? These questions haunted her as she walked to her desk. Clara encountered her on the way and upon seeing her stopped. "Angela, what are we going to do now? The situation is unbearable and people are afraid," she said, her voice trembling. Angela realized she was not alone in her concerns. "We need to gather, Clara. Talk about what's happening and how we can come together," she replied, trying to instill a bit of courage in her friend. The idea of gathering the team felt risky, but Angela knew it was necessary. If Ricardo had been fired for promoting unity, then unity was exactly what they needed. "Let's meet in the break room after work. We need to discuss this, even if it's difficult," she suggested. Clara nodded, but her expression was still filled with uncertainty. The day dragged on slowly. Angela felt increasingly anxious, worried about the upcoming meeting. The thought that they could be fired left her unsettled, but what troubled her even more was what inaction could mean. If they didn't speak up, they would be accepting oppression, and that was unacceptable. When the meeting time finally arrived, Angela entered the break room to find some colleagues already gathered. The atmosphere was thick with tension, but there was also a glimmer in some eyes, a small spark of hope. Angela began to speak. Her voice trembled slightly, but she made an effort to sound firm. "I know everyone is scared. Ricardo's firing was a harsh blow, but we can't let that silence us. We need to unite and fight for our rights." Reactions were mixed. Some were hesitant, while others seemed to agree. "What if we get fired too?" one of the colleagues asked. "If we don't fight, what do we have left?" Angela responded, feeling a growing warmth inside her. She knew fear was natural, but inaction could lead to an even darker future. The conversation was intense and filled with emotion. Some people began to open up about their experiences, frustrations and fears. Angela realized that each of them was fighting an internal battle, and it touched her deeply. Their struggle was not just against the company, but also against the fear that consumed them, and she was there not just to lead but to listen and support. By the end of the meeting, a new determination lingered in the air. They decided to prepare a letter to the management, expressing their concerns and demanding better working conditions. Angela felt that despite the challenges, a new purpose was emerging. However, the reality that the fight would be long and difficult still loomed over her. In the following days, the atmosphere in the company became even more tense. The management did not respond well to the letter, and rumors of layoffs began to circulate. Angela felt as though she were walking on a tightrope. The fear of losing her job consumed her, but at the same time, the desire to make a difference pushed her to keep going. At home, Marcus noticed that something was different about his mother. She seemed more distant and worried. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked during a moment of silence. His words made her pause and reflect. She didn't want her son to feel the weight of her choices. "I'm trying to do what's right, kid," she said, trying to smile. But the truth was that the fight was just beginning, and the consequences of her actions were not yet fully visible. As she prepared for the challenges ahead, Angela knew that the road would be filled with obstacles, but the fight for dignity and justice was something she could not ignore. She was determined to face reality, not just for herself, but for all who yearned for a better future. The journey would be difficult, but she was ready to face it head-on. Angela faced an internal storm. With each passing day, the pressure at work increased, and the feeling of insecurity followed her like a shadow. Ricardo's firing was not just a loss. It was a warning that things were deteriorating. Inside her, a battle was raging, the struggle between fear and determination. Each morning, upon waking, she wondered if she would be able to muster the courage needed to continue her fight. After the meeting with her colleagues, a new feeling began to take shape within her. The unity that had emerged among them was a sign that change was possible. The idea that she was not alone brought her some relief, but the reality that the management had not accepted their demands still weighed heavily in her heart. Rumors of layoffs and reprisals began to circulate, and panic set in among the employees. Angela knew that for many this was just a job, but for her it was a matter of dignity. At home, Angela tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but Marcus, her son, noticed the tension surrounding her. She could see that he was worried about her emotional state, and this made her feel a mix of guilt and love. She didn't want her son to grow up in an environment of fear and insecurity. In a moment of honesty, Marcus asked, "Mom, why don't you just give up on all of this? You could find a more peaceful job." The question struck her, but it also made her reflect. Giving up would mean abandoning her principles, and that was something she was not willing to do. Angela began to realize that she needed to find a balance. If she wanted to fight for a better work environment, she also needed to take care of herself and her family. She decided to seek support, not only from her colleagues, but also from friends and family. When talking to a close friend, she realized that sharing her uncertainties and fears helped her vent and clear her mind. Her friend's encouraging words gave her a new boost. "You are stronger than you think, Angela. Don't let fear prevent you from fighting for what you believe in." Over time, Angela began to take small actions to deal with her anxiety. She set aside moments in her day to meditate and reflect on her emotions. This practice helped her gain clarity and feel more centered. At the same time, she committed to educating herself more about workers' rights, studying success stories from other companies that had managed to make significant changes. This inspired her to move forward, even in the face of adversity. Weeks passed and the atmosphere in the company became increasingly tense. Angela and her colleagues felt the pressure from management, which seemed determined to stifle any movement of resistance. But instead of letting themselves be defeated, they began to organize. With Angela's support, they formed a small group that met to discuss strategies and share experiences. This new friendship that blossomed among them was a powerful reminder that together they could face any challenge. One day, during one of those meetings, a colleague shared his story. He had faced unfair dismissals in previous jobs, but he always found a new opportunity, learning from each experience. His resilience and determination inspired Angela to see her own situation in a new light. "No matter the outcome, we can rise again," he said, and those words echoed in Angela's mind. She realized that success was not just about keeping a job, but about fighting for dignity and respect. Reflecting on what was happening, Angela began to understand that her struggle went beyond her own insecurities. It was about all her colleagues who, like her, desired a healthy and fair work environment. This new perspective motivated her to stand up with even more strength. She realized that she was not only defending herself, but also everyone who was willing to fight for a better future. As a result, her confidence began to grow. The adversities she faced were not just external. She was also battling her own fears and insecurities. But as she allowed herself to be vulnerable and sought support, Angela began to transform. She learned to trust herself and accepted that asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but of strength. This inner change reflected in her outward actions, and she became an even stronger voice within the company. Angela was on a path of overcoming. The struggle that once seemed unbearable began to transform into a journey of growth. She was not alone, and her determination became contagious. If she had once feared what the future might bring, now she saw the possibility of a different tomorrow, where dignity and respect were fundamental values. The journey was still long, but with each step, Angela grew stronger, wiser, and more determined to fight for what she believed in. The day of the big meeting finally arrived. Angela felt her heart race as she prepared to face the company's management. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, and she could sense her colleagues' anxiety around her. They had gathered again, all together, to discuss the proposals they had developed, but the truth was that the pressure was palpable. Ricardo's dismissal still echoed in everyone's minds, and the possibility of more heads rolling left the atmosphere tense. As the meeting began, Angela noticed that management was determined to maintain its rigid stance. One of the director's words were cold and cutting, and the looks exchanged among them were disdainful. Angela knew this was her chance to be heard, but fear paralyzed her. However, looking at her colleagues' faces, she remembered the strength they had found together. That unity was a beacon in the darkness, and she could not let fear silence her. With a deep breath, Angela raised her hand. The silence in the room felt deafening. She stood up, feeling all eyes on her, and began to speak. Her voice trembled, but she did not let herself be defeated. "We are here because we believe in a fairer and more respectful work environment." Ricardo's dismissal was a sign that something is wrong. "We are not just asking to keep our jobs. We are fighting for the dignity of all employees." Her words resonated in the room, and a wave of murmurs began to spread among those present. Angela saw that her colleagues were starting to encourage each other, and that gave her more strength. "We cannot be treated as numbers on a graph. We are people with lives and families. What we want is a space where we can contribute and grow, not a place where fear paralyzes us." Management, however, did not seem willing to yield. One of the directors interrupted, attacking Angela's position with cold, rational arguments, trying to delegitimize her concerns. But instead of backing down, Angela remembered the conversations she had with her friends and the lessons she learned along the way. She was not alone, and that strengthened her. "I know you may only see numbers, but we are the faces behind them, and if you don't listen, you will lose not just employees, but an entire team willing to make a difference." The tension in the room increased. The board seemed frustrated, but Angela and her colleagues' determination began to create cracks in the facade of indifference. She could feel the energy shifting, and it motivated her even more. Looking at her colleagues' faces, she saw hope and courage in their eyes. They were ready to fight, and she could not fail them. The director, who had been the most hostile, began to show visible irritation. "If you are dissatisfied, the door is open," he shot back as if trying to intimidate them. But instead of backing down, this only ignited the flame of determination in Angela. She knew there was more at stake than just a job. "We are here because we believe in a better future for everyone. We cannot allow fear to prevent us from fighting for that." At that moment, a colleague of Angela stood up to support her. "I also want to speak. What is at stake is not just our jobs, but our dignity as professionals." Others began to stand up, one by one, until the room was filled with united voices. The board, which had seemed so confident, was now surrounded by a wave of resistance. Angela's fight was not just about her, it was about everyone who was with her. This was a moment of transformation. The pressure that had once felt overwhelming now turned into a wave of support and solidarity. Each person's words echoed, and the board realized that it could not silence that cry for change. After long minutes of tension, the older director, visibly shaken, called for a break. Angela and her colleagues exchanged glances, a mix of hope and nervousness. It was a small victory, but a victory that could pave the way for something greater. They knew they had taken the first step, but the road was still long. Angela left the room with a new sense of determination. She had faced her greatest challenge and, more importantly, had discovered her inner strength. The fear that had once dominated her was now just a distant echo. She was not alone in this fight. There was an army of colleagues by her side, ready to fight for dignity and respect. The journey was far from over, but Angela knew that together they could transform the company into a place where everyone could thrive. And above all, she had learned that true strength lies in unity and the courage to be heard. Angela left the room with her heart racing, but now the feeling of fear had been replaced by a wave of hope. The break requested by the board brought a moment of respite, and she saw her colleagues gathering, sharing nervous smiles and words of encouragement. It was clear that they were all changing. Each of them felt a little stronger, a little braver. As she walked down the hallway, Angela noticed that the walls, once oppressive, now seemed more open and welcoming. The atmosphere of tension that had hung over the company began to dissipate, and she felt that the courage she had awakened in herself had also touched her colleagues. More voices were willing to rise up, to be heard. It was a moment of transformation, not only for her but for everyone around her. When the meeting resumed, the board seemed more cautious. The director, who had been so hostile before, was now observing the room with a look of concern. Angela and her colleagues were more confident, and that was evident. The atmosphere had changed, and undoubtedly, their determination had made an impact. Angela felt it was the right moment to continue the fight. She stood up again, and the room, which had once been filled with fear, now vibrated with renewed energy. We want to be part of the solution, not the problem. Let's work together to create an environment where everyone feels respected and valued. We can offer suggestions. We want to collaborate. Her words were met with murmurs of approval. The board was cornered, and this was a sign that change could really happen. After long minutes of debate, finally, one of the directors, a woman who had remained silent until that moment, broke the ice. We recognize that we need to listen to you more. We will schedule regular meetings to discuss everyone's concerns. The dismissal of Ricardo was a mistake, and we want to fix that. The room erupted in applause. Angela could not believe what she was hearing. This was the first step toward ensuring her fight was not in vain. She looked at her colleagues, who were smiling and hugging. The emotion was palpable. The director's words were a sign that the resistance had been worthwhile and that unity had borne fruit. In the following days, the atmosphere in the company began to change. Angela noticed her colleagues were more motivated and engaged. Team meetings were now more open, and everyone's voices were heard. There was a sense of camaraderie that had not existed before. She knew there was still much work to be done, but the change was already underway. Angela also felt the impact in her own life. The fear that had paralyzed her had transformed into confidence. She began to get more involved in projects, to share her ideas, and to encourage others to do the same. Conversations that were once hesitant were now filled with enthusiasm and creativity. One day, while chatting with a colleague during a break, she reflected on everything that had happened. "You know, I never thought I could stand up like this. The pressure was overwhelming, but we made it. This made me realize how strong we are together." The colleague nodded, smiling. "And the most incredible thing is that now we all know we can make a difference. We are not alone." Angela smiled, feeling grateful for having taken that step. The journey was still far from over, but now she knew that true strength lies in unity and the courage to be heard. And so, with each new day, she and her colleagues continued to build a fairer and more respectful work environment where everyone could thrive and grow together. Angela watched the transformation of the company around her and felt like a new person. The fear that once paralyzed her had dissipated, giving way to renewed confidence. She realized that her act of courage had triggered a wave of change, not only in her life but in the lives of all her colleagues. The atmosphere was lighter, and the conversations that were once fearful whispers were now vibrant exchanges of ideas and suggestions. Days passed, and the management began to implement new regular meetings where everyone could openly express their concerns. This not only brought a sense of belonging to the team, but also made each member feel heard and valued. Angela noticed that by standing up and fighting for what she believed in, she had inspired others to do the same. The unity that formed among them was palpable and powerful. Over time, Angela emerged as a natural leader. Her voice had become a symbol of hope and change, and she began to be called upon to lead important projects. Each small success was a victory, not just for her, but for the entire team. The feeling that they were together on a common mission further strengthened the bonds among them. Angela reflected on her journey, recognizing that true success was not about holding a high position or making more money, but about creating an environment where everyone could thrive and feel good. However, the management was not without its critics. Some still resisted change, and Angela felt she needed to be firm. In one of the meetings, a director who had been particularly hostile in the past began to criticize the new practices again. The room filled with tension, but instead of backing down, Angela stood up, determined not to let negativity prevail. "If you can't see the value in hearing our team's voices, then maybe it's time to reconsider your role here," she said firmly. The room fell silent, and the impact of her words reverberated throughout the environment. That was her form of revenge. No longer accepting silence, but rather making everyone's voice count. Time passed, and the changes solidified. Angela had not only changed her life, but also the culture of the company. Now every employee felt part of something greater, and the company thrived. Angela realized that true victory was not about defeating opponents, but about uniting people around a common purpose. The friendships she formed in the process were deep and meaningful, and she knew each of them played a vital role in the change they had created. Looking to the future, Angela felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had been challenging, but the lessons learned were invaluable. She understood that true strength lies in unity and the courage to stand up. Each person had the power to make a difference, and that was the true essence of success. And so, Angela invited everyone to reflect on their own journeys. Remember, change starts with a step. Don't be afraid to stand up and fight for what is right. Share your stories, inspire others, and together we can create a better world. She knew that by encouraging others, she was helping to spread a wave of positivity and transformation. Like and subscribe so we can continue this journey together, she said with a genuine smile. Your voice matters, and together we can make a difference.